And he was probably one of the most attractive men I think I've ever seen in my entire life.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here and welcome to Sketching Encounters. My guest today is Angelique Benham, and she has the most remarkable, the most remarkable experience to share with us. I hope you guys enjoyed as much as I have. Angelique, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're so welcome. So just tell our audience just a little bit about yourself, whatever you want them to know, and then just jump right in and share with us your encounter that you had that day.
Okay. First of all, I'm a mother of three now adult grown sons. I work at a clinic here down in outside of Roseburg, Oregon. I did live for 35 years in the northeastern corner of Washington and then moved to North Idaho, where I lived for another 10 years. So
Wow,
I'm sharing my
that's
age here a
awesome.
little bit. But yeah, so my first encounter, first of all, I do want to kind of introduce myself a little bit. I am on a research team now, presently. It's Legacy Discoveries.
Nice.
Um, but at the time that I had my first encounter, I didn't even believe in Sasquatch. I didn't believe in the forest people. I thought it was a big joke and a lot of hoaxing going on. And so I didn't believe in it at the time that it happened. So my life has since changed. But it happened the year 2000. I was kayaking with my family. My brother had just passed away a couple months earlier, and his three sons and my three sons were all about the same age. So they were all, from grade school on up to, almost, high school, early high school. So we had a big group of boys with us, and my sister-in-law and myself, and then all these boys in kayaks. And we decided to kayak Sullivan Lake, which was our favorite place to go to. It is a huge lake right at the corner of northeastern Washington, right by the Canadian border. So close that basically, if you just go for a ride around the lake and keep going a little ways, you reach the border. So it's that close to the Canadian border. Um, as the layout of the land is that is the Selkirk Mountain Range. The Selkirk Mountain Range goes all the way up into Canada, and then it comes crosses the border down into the States and it goes into the Hoodoo Mountain Range. So the Selkirks is a part of the Hoodoos. So the Hoodoo Mountain Range, a part of the Selkirks, comes all the way over to the Spokane Valley and down into the Palouse, um, going into Idaho,
Mhm.
where it goes into almost the southern part of Idaho. So it bleeds out into kind of high mountain desert. But it also connects on to the Cabinet Mountain Range that goes into Montana. So it's like a big, gigantic T when it comes to this mountain range. So they're all connected all the way
Mhm.
across from Canada, over Montana, and then, it just this whole area. So it's extreme wilderness. And this Sullivan Lake at one time used to have a feeding area on this one mountain. And I can't remember the name of the mountain. I want to say it's called Long Mountain, but I'm not sure which mountain it is. I'll have to look again. It's been a while since I had been over there, so I can't remember the name of the mountain. But on one side of Sullivan Lake, there's this big mountain that they used to feed the bighorn sheep on.
Wow.
So it was a program to kind of keep the bighorn sheep, going through the winter. And so they had this big feeding station with a barn and all these, hay bales and stuff. And it worked great for the sheep, but it also turned into a tremendous feeding ground for predators because they would wait
Wow.
for the sheep to come down to feed, and then the sheep would get killed by the predators. So they ended up stopping that feeding station and just kind of letting them go. And very, very rarely, you can still sometimes see a few of the mountain sheep up there, but I think most of them are gone now. But at the time that this was going on 20 years ago, my kids and I were still going to Sullivan Lake because you could go to that mountain and you could take field glasses and you could look up and you could see the sheep. And it was just a really good family outing for my kids and I. Well, we decided to go ahead and take our kayaks and we put in at one end of the lake, and it was where you put in at, it's called Noisy Creek. And so we put in at the Noisy Creek campground, and then we kayaked the full length of the lake, which we thought we could do it in just a few hours, but it turned out to be an all-day adventure. And by the time we got to the far end of the lake, the day was half over already. And we're kind of going, ugh, it's going to be a long trek back. And we're going to have to, we can stay for a short time, but we're going to have to turn and head back. Otherwise, it's going to be past dark before we can get the kayaks loaded. So when we got there, everybody got out of their kayaks. We're eating our lunch. The boys are swimming and splashing around. And my sister-in-law and I both got a really uneasy feeling, just really like we were being watched. And I know that that's, stereotypical. Everybody says that, but it's true. You really do get a feeling like somebody is watching you, and it's not a good. Sorry, I'm in my Jeep and a Jeep just drove by and they gave me the Jeep wave, so I had to give it back. But anyway, so we were both having this really uneasy feeling, and we were kind of talking, her and I. The boys were in the, playing in the water and stuff, and we were both saying, um, we need to keep the kids together. Don't let anybody go off by themselves. We both were just feeling like the hair on our arms was standing up, and we were both kind of going, I don't like the way that this feels. There was other families that were also playing at the water, swimming, and a lot of noise and commotion going on. But her and I are both really intuitive, and we just felt like something's not right. So we got the kids, let them splash around for a few minutes, and then we were like, let's go ahead and head out. So we got all the boys loaded up, and she told me she's going to go on with them, and I lagged back behind. Now, this is where I have to be honest. So back in that time of my life, I was smoking cigarettes, and I also knew that I didn't want to be an example to my kids. So I told her, I'm like, go on ahead. I'm going to stay back and have a smoke, And so she said, oh, don't worry, you can catch up. And so I stayed back, and she took the kids and headed back down. And so I snuck a cigarette. And just as a side note, my kids hated smoking so bad that when they caught me having cigarettes, they duct taped them to the ceiling because they knew that I couldn't reach it. Even on the kitchen table, if I crawled up on the kitchen table, I couldn't reach my smokes. So,
oh, that's so great.
so if I was gonna smoke, I had to sneak it. Okay. So that's a little confession about my past. But anyway, so I'm sitting there and I'm eating my lunch, I'm still feeling really uncomfortable, like I'm still being watched. And I decided what I was going to do was I was going to go ahead and get in my boat. And I was just going to maybe paddle out maybe a few yards away from shore. That way, if there was somebody that was, you know,
Yeah.
just not a good thing, that I would be far enough out in the water where I wouldn't have to worry about anything.
Yeah.
And right about the time that I got in my boat, all of the families and everybody else that was there at the beach left. Like I was literally there by myself. Like the whole beach got up and left. Now, whether or not they were doing that because they were feeling the same thing I was, I don't know. Other than they might have just kind of gone, okay, it's time to go. And so they all left at the same time. But
Hmm.
I was by myself. So I got in my boat and I went out a few yards and I just kind of went, okay, whew, by myself, nobody, I'm going to see if anything happens. But let's go back a little bit to my childhood and the kid that was traumatized by the movie Jaws. Okay. I'm in my kayak and I'm thinking, I still got that bad feeling. And I'm going, what if it's in the water?
Wow.
So I had given one of my life vests to one of the other boys. So one of the other boys didn't have a life vest. I think we had an extra kid with us, is what happened. But
Yeah.
we had all of the life vests were on the kids, and I didn't have one. And so
Hmm.
I got thinking, okay, I'm not a very good swimmer, so I'm going to go to the shore, and I'm going to kayak just offshore. And that way, if I roll my boat, I'm right there. I can just swim to the shore.
Yeah.
And I really could not cut that feeling of there's something not right. There's something bad. So
Wow.
um it was a really weird feeling. It's almost like you're on the verge of panic, but you're not losing it. It's almost like a little kid when you get up in the middle of the night and you have to go to the bathroom and you go to turn off your light and then you just run into bed so you can dive under the covers and feel like you're safe. It was kind of that almost urgent feeling like I need to get away from the middle part of the water. I need to go over to the edge where I could feel safer.
Hmm.
So this is what's going on, but whether or not it had anything to do with what was about to happen, I have no idea. It was just what was happening.
Right.
So, and I kind of thought that maybe I should, talk about that just because that is something that seems to come up, a lot.
Right.
Well, I was looking across now where the campground sits, where Sullivan Lake campground is, and you can look at it on a map. It's
Hmm.
like just a big long rectangle where you put in here at Noisy Creek, but you're here,
Right.
and then you've got the mountain on this side. We were following the mountain down to get back to Noisy Creek, but where I was still sitting was up at the campground. Now, right at the crook of that rectangle, there happens to be a rope swing. And I don't know if the rope swing is still there, but a lot of the people that lived there back then talk about that rope swing. So whether or not it's still there or not, I don't know.
Hmm.
But up at the crook, I'm looking across over and I see two little boys. Now, these little boys are probably 8 years old, and they're definitely our little boys, not my family, but they're definitely
Somebody's.
human, I guess, little
Yeah.
boys. One of them's wearing red shorts. The other one, I think, was wearing blue or yellow or something. But it was two little boys, and they're probably about 8 years old. And they're coming down the pathway from the rope swing, and they're playing at the water's edge. And I'm looking over at them across the way, and I see what looked like a grandpa following them down to the water's edge. And he's just watching them, and he goes and he sits down behind them on like I think it was a stump. And he just sits down, and I'm watching this grandfather watching the two little kids, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm not alone anymore. And then I kind of went, if I'm going to kayak, I'm going to go that way. I'm going to go over towards them. So I did. I finished my cigarette, and I'm not in a big hurry. I'm still taking things pretty slow, and I'm barely moving.
Hmm.
And I mean, I'll put an oar in, and then I'll just kind of coast and put another oar in and kind of coast. And I really wasn't going very fast at all. And I aimed towards where those two little boys were. And as I'm coming up, I'm seeing the grandpa, and he's sitting down on the stump, and he's got his leg crossed in front of him. And I'm thinking to myself, holy, it's 90 some degrees. And he's got a turtleneck on, and he's got long sleeves and long pants. And I'm going, and you can see the silver in his hair. And I'm thinking, he must just be either elderly, or he's from, maybe someplace where it's hot all the time, because 90 degrees, even the grandpas on the beach were wearing, tank tops and having their shirts off and stuff. But this man was fully dressed. And I was just thinking, okay, maybe he's, just not used to it, or whatever. But
How far away do you think you were at that point when you're thinking he's dressed in a turtleneck?
I was probably about 100 yards away.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. So I was down the beach a little ways, and he was across the beach around the corner, this long rectangle. I was kind of mid beach,
Okay.
and he was over here. So it was about 100 yards across. I've had some people ask me, are you familiar with football field? Well, yeah, my kids played football. So it was about that far away.
Sure.
That you could see him, but he was quite a ways away.
Gotcha.
Um, when I started aiming towards him, I was looking more of the little boys that were playing, because they were hucking rocks in the water, and the old man was sitting behind, and he just looked like he was just watching them carefully to make sure something didn't happen. That was the whole impression I got, was he was babysitting his grandkids.
Right.
And so as I'm coming closer and coming closer and coming closer, I noticed that the two little boys kind of turned around, and they went back up the hill and disappeared back in the trees along the path. And the grandpa stayed. And so, there again, I'm getting closer. I notice him turn his head and kind of look at me. And he looks over at me, and he's just watching me. So I wave at him, and he didn't wave back. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, he just didn't see me. So I put another oar in, and I'm just cruising real slow. And then he turns, and I know he's looking directly at me. And so I'm getting ready to pass by him. Now, I want to explain, I was only offshore about 8 feet. I
Wow.
was literally just past where the branches come out to the water. I was skirting those edges of those branches. So I was that close. And he was at the water's edge on the stump. So as I'm coming up on him, I see him look directly at me. So I wave again, and he doesn't wave back. And I'm going, okay, now he's just an elder, and he doesn't want to be disturbed, and probably one of those, just somebody that isn't very friendly. So I'm like, okay, no problem. But I'm looking away. I'm, kind of doing my thing, but I'm still headed towards him. And as I'm coming up on him, now I'm getting ready to pass him. He's sitting here on the bank, and I'm getting ready to pass him. Okay. As I'm getting ready to pass him, I look up on him, and I get a really good look at him at that point in time and go, oh, he's not a grandpa. He's not a grandpa. He was probably only maybe in his middle 40s at the most. Um, and he was probably one of the most attractive men I think I've ever seen in my entire life. Um, I literally took a double take, and then I kind of got embarrassed because he was so attractive. I kind of glanced away, but then when I looked back,
Wow.
that's when I got a really good look at him and realized that he was not wearing a turtleneck. He actually was covered in hair. Now I had made eye contact with him, and I had gotten close enough at that point. I was only about 8 feet away from him, 8 or 9 feet away from him. As I was passing him, I looked directly into his eyes, which they tell you don't do,
Right.
but I didn't know any better. And I looked directly into his eyes, and he had the most beautiful golden brown eyes I have ever seen in my whole life, with these real thick black eyelashes. And he was just a very strong, hyper masculine face, like very square, strong jaw. And when I was coming past him, he was kind of like, I'm going to turn my face a little bit. He was kind of looking at me out of the corner of his eye like this. But
Mm-hmm.
then as I was coming in front of him, his face kind of softened, and he was beautiful. I mean, he was absolutely the epitome of probably the most attractive man I think I've ever seen.
Wow.
When I looked away and looked back, as I was literally right directly across from him, I didn't make eye contact and I focused more on this part of him. And when I did, I caught a glimpse of his nipples. And I went, oh my gosh. My whole thought was, he's covered in hair. He's got that disease that the wolf boy from the Barnum and Bailey circus. Oh, and here I am gawking at him. Oh, what a jerk. My whole thought was, I don't want to embarrass him, but I just was gawking at this guy who probably wanted, he stays out by himself away from the beach because he's got this
Yeah.
hair thing going on, you
Yeah.
know. And so here I was, I looked away, and I'm trying to kind of act like you do when, somebody trips and falls. You're like, oh, I didn't see that. See what? Oh, I see hair covered people all the time. And so I didn't really, I tried to make it look like it was not a big deal to me. So I looked away, and then I looked back over my shoulder. And when I looked back over my shoulder, he had stood up. And when he had stood up, he had brought his arm up, and he had at that point kind of turned to the side. Now, I didn't see any genitalia,
Mm-hmm.
okay?
Mm-hmm.
He had one leg kind of up a little bit, and he had reached up with his arm and he'd pulled a branch out of his away from his head. And as he did, what I did see was these massive shoulders and massive biceps that were just like, he was like a linebacker, but perfectly proportionate. Like, uh, you know, uh, and I don't want to diss on anybody if they're, into working out and stuff, but you see a lot of these people that are like on steroids and
Mm-hmm.
stuff where they they tend to look almost cartoonish with their muscle
Yes.
patterns. This guy was perfect. He was beyond muscly, but perfectly proportionate to the
Wow.
point that when he moved his leg, I could see that muscle down his thigh, like where you see like Olympic joggers where they'll
Mhm.
have that muscle down their thigh that will kind of ripple when they run. That muscle rippled.
Wow.
And I looked away and I glanced back. And at that time, I passed him. I glanced back over my shoulder. And when I did, he was gone. And I thought, well, that you don't see that every day. You know? But I'm not thinking Bigfoot. I'm not thinking Sasquatch. I'm not thinking anything other than there's a really, really, really good looking man that's got a skin thing going on or a hair thing going on. And here I am gawking at him. Well, as the day goes on, because it took hours to kayak this lake, as the day goes on, I pick up where my sister's at or my sister-in-law's at. And
Mhm.
when I met her, she was in her boat facing the mountain. So,
Mhm.
so it trying to remember how I picked this rectangle with the big mountain on one side where the sheep were at. She's facing this mountain in her boat, and I'm coming up on her in my kayak, and we meet in the middle. And she's looking directly up at the top of that bald knob on the center of that mountain. She looks at me. She goes, "Look, there's a hunter up there." Well, of course, I look up to the top of the mountain, and sure enough, there he is. And
Wow.
he's walking parallel to me. I'm down on the lake. He's up at the top of that mountain. And as I'm kayaking, he's staying equal with me. So I'm not very good at, math or anything else, but for him to be able to walk and keep pace with me the whole time, and I'm clear down at the lake and he's up at the top, he had to have been scooting right along. But when you watched him walk, he would just take a few steps, look down. You could see him look down and walk a few steps, look down. And he did that all the way across the top of that mountain, all the way across the top of the mountain where it drops down to the other side and got into the trees again. And then from there, the trees were too thick where you can't see anything. So it was like, um, you know, you could feel that he was still there, but you could never see him. And there were several times that I stopped along, to rest a couple times before it started getting evening time, that I kind of still looked off in the trees and tried to see if I could see him. I couldn't see him, but you could still kind of get that feeling that you were being watched. But it wasn't, at that point in time, it wasn't necessarily a feeling of danger. It was
Mhm.
more of just somebody's got eyes on you. You're being watched. So
Yeah.
that was when we finally got to the end of the lake. It was getting dark, so it was an all-day adventure. When we got to the other side of the lake, we put our boats in the trucks and we headed on out. And after a while, it kind of, I can't say it got to me, but I couldn't stop thinking about it because I kept thinking, what is the skin disease? What is the skin disease? Is it a disease? What is it? I wanted to research, and I
Mhm.
got thinking more about it. And at that time I was going to college, and of course, back in the internet at the year 2000, 20 some years ago, you really couldn't find much of anything when you were researching. It was really difficult to research 20 years ago on the
Yeah.
internet.
Yeah.
Um, I finally found one spot that was it was a forum where you could, it was for anything paranormal and anything that was an anomaly. You could write in your story, and then this chat room would read it, and then they would all kind of pool together and give you their opinions. So I submitted it, and there were some people who said Bigfoot, some people said Bigfoot, and I was like, it wasn't a Bigfoot. I just saw a really big man who was covered in hair. He wasn't a Bigfoot, because in
Right.
my mind, and what I related to was the Patterson Gimlin film that I didn't believe in.
Right.
So here I was at that time going, if there is such a thing, it's going to look like the Patterson Gimlin film,
Yeah.
because that was my only frame of reference. And quite frankly, at that point in time, that really was the only frame of reference for most of us,
That's right.
ex- except for people who were having their own encounters.
Hmm.
So, but on TV, that was what you related to.
Exactly.
Well, he didn't look like Patty. He didn't look like Patty. Um, so as people would say, oh, maybe it was a Bigfoot, I'd be like, no, it wasn't. It was just a big hairy guy. Well, I'm having more and more cars that keep pulling in. This is the only place that I could get to quickly. I'm so sorry.
No, it's fine.
You can probably edit that part out.
Could you tell about the size of him? Like, what were you thinking in terms of his height?
Oh goodness. Um, when I saw him, I, I I did put to reference my own dad, because I come from a huge family. I'm the shortest person in the family. I'm 5'2", but my dad was 6'6". And
Wow.
so my dad, I remember thinking when he stood up and he moved that branch out of his face, I remember thinking, whoever this guy is, he's got at least 2 feet on my dad. He has at
Wow.
least 2 feet. And so when I saw him, I was thinking, along with this skin problem, does that correlate with gigantism or something?
Hmm.
But it just wasn't sitting well. So that's when I kind of tapped into this website to see if somebody can help me. And with everybody saying Bigfoot, I was going, no, that's not the answer that I want. I want to know what the skin disease is that makes, somebody super hairy and really big.
Yeah.
So I kind of gave up, and I shut my computer down, and I didn't think about it for a little while. Now, it's been over 20 years, 24 years since it happened. So I don't remember how long the time frame
Hmm.
was between when I gave up on looking on the computer and when I actually got a phone call. But in the year 2000, we had these handy dandy little boxes that hooked to your landline that were caller ID, and they had just come out. And I got a phone call that said US government. Now, I've had a couple people that told me, you're fibbing about this and everything, but I'm not fibbing, because I have a brother who works in the US government. And when I saw the US government, I thought something happened to my brother.
Hmm.
Somebody's calling me to tell me something bad happened to my brother. And so I picked up the phone, and I got a phone call from a man who told me who his name was and what I want to say what he said his department was that he worked in.
Hmm.
And I remember thinking, well, at the time, I'm kind of pitching what he's saying in and out at the same time, because I'm waiting for him to say something tragic about my brother. And he goes, I want to talk to you about the Sasquatch that you saw at Sullivan Lake. And I went, what? I didn't see a Sasquatch at Sullivan Lake. I saw a big hairy guy. And I'm still kind of halfway waiting for him to go, you know, to tell me something about my brother, but he doesn't. What he did was he kind of, I can't say he didn't laugh, but what he did was he kind of went, I want to talk to you about the Sasquatch that you saw at Sullivan Lake. Um, when he did that, it was almost like a light switch went off in my head, and I don't know why, but it immediately just put me into almost like a panic. And I remember going, don't talk to this guy, don't talk to this guy, don't talk to him. I just immediately, my response was, get off the phone, hang up now. And the only thing that I remember doing was I said, I didn't see a Sasquatch. I just saw a big hairy guy. I just saw a big hairy guy, and I hung up. I know it was rude. I probably, at this point in time, I would want to hear what the guy would say. I'd be like, really? Why do you want to talk to me about anything? But at that point in time, it just immediately spooked me, and I hung up.
Yeah.
He tried calling back, and I saw US government, and I didn't pick up the phone. Whether or not there was anything nefarious about it, I don't know. Or whether the guy was just calling me on his lunch break because he happened to be a part of the chat room and wanted to help me, I don't know. I
Wow.
wish I could turn back the clock and find out. But at that point in time, I didn't talk to him. So when that did happen, now my mind is going, did I? Did I see a Sasquatch?
Yeah. Yeah.
Did I? Um, so I was talking to my kids because my kids were, my older sons. They were saying, "Hey, mom, we did see the guy up on the knoll, not the knoll, the guy on the top of the lake following you. We did see him following you." So, and hey, and so they were telling me, yes, they saw him too. So my oldest son, he told me, he said, "Hey, there's this new site. There's this new group of people that you can get a hold of on the internet now that can help you." And so, they told me, he said that, the guys at school are talking about it, and you should get a hold of them. So I did. And I got a hold of the BFRO,
Hmm.
and I filled out the template and all this other stuff. And almost immediately got a phone call from a gentleman who worked for them at that time. He doesn't anymore,
Right.
but at that time he did work for them. And we ended up talking for a couple of hours.
Wow.
And he made me tell it over and over. It made me tell the story, over and over. And I said, why are you doing this? And he said, well, I'm vetting you to see if you're really actually telling me the truth. And he said, I've seen enough of these forest people, to know that you are.
Hmm.
And he said, I know you're telling the truth. And I said, so it was a Sasquatch? And he's like, yeah, it was. And then he started talking to me about the differences and how they are just like us. You're going to have some that look like Patty. You're going to have some that look more like you and I. You're going to have some that look like, monsters. And you're going to have some that look like, if you just put clothes on them, they would look like everyday people. It's, they vary just like we do.
Right.
And I think you probably see that yourself when you're doing people's sketches, how every single one of them is an individual, just like we are.
Absolutely. Absolutely do that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I had a great visit with him, and he ended up being a very dear friend of mine. And he and his wife now are very, very, very dear people to us, and we contact them all the time. And I've actually spoken in symposiums alongside him, and that's Mel Scahan and his wife Christina. They're great people,
People.
just great people. But he no longer works for the BFRO, but he still speaks a lot at
Hmm.
symposiums and
Hmm.
stuff across the Pacific Northwest. Um, and his wife, she's just a magnet for the forest people. They come to, if they sleep in a tent, they're pushing on the tent and making noises and stuff. She's a magnet, and they're just very, very, very dear people to us.
Yeah.
But throughout the years, Mel was kind of my mentor,
Mm.
and he was able to put me in contact with more and more people. And in the very beginning, after I saw this first encounter, I had not yet um, learned enough. I thought myself that was a once in a lifetime experience. It'll never happen again. And wow, I was so fortunate to have actually seen a real Sasquatch. What I didn't realize was that, well, at least until later, was that if you have an encounter with one that allows you to see it, that usually you make a connection with their people almost.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
once you have one encounter with them, you're going to have more. Um, and it depends on you and your respect for them, what kind of an encounter you're going to have. Um, so the next encounters that I had, very brief, not as close, not as I guess personal as the first one that I saw, but and it would always be when I was with somebody else, so they saw them too, or I was thinking about what I was going to make for supper, or my mind was not even close to being talking about, or thinking about it. But then one would walk across the road, or you'd see one coming up the hill and you'd be like, did that just happen? Yes, it did.
Wow.
So it happened more and more until my family started having more and more encounters, and my kids started having encounters. And then it's now progressed to the point where I was asked to be a part of a research team to help other people, because what happened with us was something that the elders of the tribe, I'm Native, so the elders of the tribe came to me and said, the forest people, um, you're connected to them. And so what you need to do is, you're being called to do this. You're being called to teach and to help our people understand that they are people. They're not an animal. They're not a monster. Some of them may act like monsters because they hold a grudge,
Hmm.
but they're not. They're people. And so what happened was is they started talking to me and saying, look, this is something that you need to do, because
Wow.
they're communicating, they're coming to your family, they're coming to you, and they're leaving gifts, they're leaving. It's almost on a daily basis where my son, where he's at, they will come to him and leave him gifts. He's got a gifting station set up that almost every day they're leaving everything from small trinkets and little pieces of moss and agates and rocks and poof balls from dandelion flowers. They leave these sweet little gifts almost daily. And then my son gives them gifts back. Like he'll give them pinches of tobacco, or
Mm.
he'll give them his own little stones. If he finds a pretty stone, he'll stick it in his pocket and then gift it to him. So this is an exchange that's going on all the time.
Wow.
And so one of the things that, along with what the elders told me that I needed to do, was to start treating them like people instead of treating them like an animal or treating them like a myth or whatever. but treat them like you're going into the Brazilian rainforest and you just came in contact with somebody from another tribe that is not used to being civilized, you know.
Right. Right.
What's the first thing that you're going to do in intercultural communication? You're going to treat them with respect.
Respect.
Yes, and respect is a huge thing with them. If you don't show them respect, you're going to most likely have a bad encounter. I had an encounter, this would be 2 weekends ago, that showed me, okay, this was a disrespect to them, and I needed to apologize for what
Really?
I did. And that was a friend of mine really, really wanted to go and wants to see them, wants to have an encounter with them. And he's like, you have encounters all the time. And he said, when he's hanging out with me, he goes, I have encounters. I don't know what it is about you, but when I'm hanging out with you, I have encounters. So he asked to go camping with me. And I said, okay, all right, we'll go camping. So I'm in my Jeep and I have the whole back set up with sleeping bags and bedding and all this other stuff that I just keep with me. Well, he does the same thing in his vehicle. He's got one of those roof tents and
Hmm.
stuff on the top of his rig. So we went up to a place and I told him, I said, let's go find a structure. So I'm gonna tell you this, and I hope that your listeners will know not to do what I did or what we did. So we found a huge structure and we walked around, made sure that it wasn't windfall, snow load, or a logging project.
Right.
So we knew that it was logs that had been put into the shape of an asterisk out in the middle of the forest where there was no logging activity. And where I'm at in the Umpqua National Forest, they don't get a lot of snow load. And it was down low, so they don't get heavy snows here. They get very, very small snows. Um, it wasn't windfall because there were no holes in the ground, there were no snaps. It had been carried there. These
Right.
logs had been carried there from some other place
Yeah.
and set up into an asterisk. Well, as we were going up the mountain, we noticed this off in the distance. And I said, that's where we want to go. That's where we're going to go. We're going to go over there. We're going to give tobacco. We're going to make communication with them. We're going to talk to them. And we're going to let them know that we're here in a good way. So we did. We went over there. We brought loose tobacco.
Hmm.
We uh, went to the structure and we said out loud, introduced ourselves, said who we are, that we're here in a good way. We're here to see you. We're here because we want to learn about you so we can teach our people about you so that your people won't get killed
Hmm.
and shot at and other things. And we were only there for a few minutes and we started getting whistles. And they weren't bird whistles, they were like whistles. So we started whistling back. And as we were whistling back, it didn't matter what we did. We got responses from about 3 or 4 different directions. And of course, my friends just, they're here. And I'm like, yes, they're here. They're here. And so we kind of got excited and we said, okay, we're going to stay the night and see what happens. We're going to invite them to our camp and we're going to stay. We're not going to do anything with we're not going to go out of our way to go hunt them. We're just going to sit down in our chairs. We're going to talk. We're going to hang out and we're going to invite them to come join us. And we did. And just before dark, there was this huge cloud of dirt that came off the hillside. And he and I are both like, where's that dirt coming from? Because we still had the cars parked, nose to nose up on the top of the road. And we're down over the hillside by about probably 25 yards, 25, 30 yards off the road is where we set our chairs up.
Mm-hmm.
So he goes, well, I'm going to go hike up and see if there's a car that just went by. So he hikes up the hill and he goes, there wasn't a car. I don't know what that was, but there's just this huge cloud of dirt like a car had gone by. I stayed down there and it started getting darker and darker, and we're just hanging out talking. And it got dark. And as soon as it got dark where you couldn't see anything, my friend told me that he had kind of put it out there through like mind speak,
Mm-hmm.
inviting them to come to so where we could see them. I'm talking to him, we're chit-chatting, we're just hanging out like you would if you're camping and hanging around. We didn't have a fire going, it's dark. All of a sudden we hear crash, 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 crash coming through the foliage.
Mm.
And I told him, I'm like, did you hear that? And he goes, yep, I heard that. And I said, we're just going to talk. Let's just talk and act like ourselves. We're not going to do anything. And as we're talking, we're hanging out. It's getting closer and closer and closer. And right about the time it got probably, I would say about 25 yards from us, I stood up and I started greeting it in Lakota because he and I had talked about it. And we were saying, we need to greet these people in the old languages, not English, because English is a new language. We need to greet them in old languages. So he happens to be from Spain. And so I told him, I said, you greet him in your language, I'll greet him in my language. And then we'll see if that works better. And so I stood up and I greeted this being coming towards us in Lakota. And as soon as I spoke and I introduced myself in Lakota, it went from crash, crash, crash to it turned directly at me and went crash, 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 and ran towards us.
Oh my God.
And it stopped about, I would say, I'm looking at a distance across the road from where I'm at, and I'm thinking, okay, it was probably about 20 feet, 20 or 30, 20, 25.
Mm-hmm.
I would say between 20 and 30 feet from us, it stopped. And I looked over at my friend Carlos and I said, we need to go.
Okay.
And he goes, yep, we need to go. And so we stood up and we grabbed our chairs and we were folding them up and hooking them under our arms. And at the same time, I turned in that direction. Now it's dark. And I said, we're really sorry. We shouldn't have done this. We went past where we should have been. We're going to take our things and we're going to go back up to the road where we belong. And Carlos is like, we're sorry. We're taking our things. We're going up to the road. We took our chairs and as we hiked it, we didn't hear anything behind us. We didn't hear any, when it comes to, if you've ever heard a bear charge, I've been bluff charged by bears before. They'll pop their jaws and they'll
Yes.
snap their teeth at you,
Teeth.
and you can tell that it's a bear. This wasn't doing any of that. It was bipedal and it ran towards us and then stopped.
Mm.
We grabbed our things, went up to where the two cars were, and we put our chairs in between the two fronts and we sat down right there on the gravel. And we only moved like 25 yards. We didn't leave the area. Yeah. We didn't get in our vehicles and drive off. We just moved to where the trucks were. And as soon as we set our stuff down on the road, it was like, it was okay. Wow. It was okay. We were where we were supposed to be, which is up where the humans go on the road. You leave that area to them. That's their area. You don't trespass. We trespassed. And so when we went up there and we sat down in the chairs, everything was fine. We didn't have any feeling of being
Wow.
afraid. We could hear footfalls down in that area where we were at, but we didn't have any aggressive
Hmm.
charging like we had had before when it ran at me when I was
Wow.
speaking to it. So after we got back up there, we sat down and he brought out his didgeridoo and he goes, I'm going to try playing music. And I said, do it. So he brought out his didgeridoo and he started playing his didgeridoo, which is just phenomenal. The guy is so talented. Then he brought out native flute and started playing just these beautiful tunes and stuff. And we could hear them moving through the trees and coming around. But we were like, okay, we're going to stay right here on the road where we belong. And then it got probably about, I would say, midnight or so that I, he said, I just got a feeling like I put it out there to them that I want to see them, and they told me mind speak
Hmm.
because he's got that ability. He goes, they told me if you want to see us, come to us. So I said, go ahead, Carlos. You go right on ahead there, buddy. And I stayed right there. And he goes, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go. He said, but I don't want to go down there. I'm not gonna go down over the hillside now. He said, I'm gonna go down the road and I'm just gonna walk right. He said, I'm gonna go walk down the road. And I said, okay, I'm gonna stay right here. So I stayed right at right where we walked up and I sat there and I just kind of sat there in the dark and I listened and I could hear Carlos moving around at the back of his pickup.
Hmm.
And then I was in my, in front of the Jeep and I'm going, okay, he didn't go very far. He just went on the other side of the pickup. And that's fine. And so I'm hearing him moving around and walking back and forth and I'm just sitting there and finally he was gone for a long time. So I went, you know, I'm tired. I'm gonna go to bed. So I got in the back of my Jeep and I went crawled into my Jeep. And then I hear him walk up behind my Jeep and he's moving around and I'm like, I'm thinking, is he okay? Maybe, is he okay? And I'm like, okay, well, I figure if he's having issues, he's gonna, tap on my window or something, tell me to wake up and come out. But he didn't. And then I went to sleep, and right about probably 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm hearing him moving around and he's mumbling and making noises and, and stuff. And I'm like, well, he sounds like he's irritated. Like maybe he's having issues getting his tent open on his truck. So I'm thinking, okay, maybe he needs help. I don't know, but I'm waiting for him to tap on my window, wake me up and say, hey, come help me open my tent or something. But he didn't. And so I'm like, okay, I'm not going to get out there and make an issue because if he's whatever, I'm just going to let him do what he's going to do. And he can set up his tent and stuff. If he needs me, he'll come wake me up. He didn't. So I went right back to sleep. And then daybreak, I wake up and I hear his zipper on his tent. And so I look out, the dash of my Jeep, and sure enough, he's crawling down the roof tent, crawling down the ladder from his roof tent. And I'm like, hey, Carlos, did you have trouble with your Jeep last night? And he's like, no, did you hear that last night? And I'm like, yeah, I said I could hear you. And he goes, it wasn't me. And I'm like, what happened? And then he told me, he goes, he said, I went to bed about 15 minutes after you did. He said, they were in our camp the whole night. They were walking
Wow.
around, they were rattling stuff, they were talking back and forth. He said, I heard words going back and forth between them. They were talking to each other. And I'm like,
Yeah.
that wasn't you? And he goes, no. I said, I thought you were mad because you couldn't get your Jeep, your truck tent open. He goes, no. And I said, well, and the conversation goes by for a little
Hmm.
bit and stuff.
Yeah.
And then I asked him, what you didn't walk very far last night. And he goes, I walked down the road about a mile. And I'm like, you were down the road about a mile? I thought you were just staying on the other side of your truck. And he goes, no. He goes, I was gone for like an hour, maybe 2 hours. And I'm like,
Wow.
I thought that was you the whole time, just on the other side of your truck. And he goes, it was them.
Oh
It
my
was
goodness.
them.
Wow.
So we got out and started looking for tracks and stuff. We didn't see anything in the road, but what we did see was right directly across from where the two vehicles were. On one side, we've got the hill.
Hmm.
We've got the two vehicles in the middle facing each other. And then on the other side, we've got the hillside going up. We're sitting on the road. On this hillside, there was a enormous track, um, not track, but like a game trail, but it wasn't like elk or anything else. This trail was probably a good 4 feet wide with different size footprints. And they went
Wow.
all the way up the hill, and all we could think of was we just looked at each other and went, we parked in their driveway. We parked in their driveway and camped in their driveway. No wonder they were upset.
Oh
So,
man.
so yeah. So, um, that was a learning lesson. And Carlos and I both kind of said, what we did was wrong. We should have, first of all, asked permission to stay there the night, which we didn't. We just said, we're going to stay the night here. We're assuming it's going to be okay. It wasn't. And when you are going to stay the night in an area, stay the night where people are supposed to be. Because where we were at, we tried to stay the night down where they belong. And that was a disrespectful thing for us to do. So we left tobacco and apologized and said we were sorry.
Yeah.
And we left, but they were respectful in that they didn't do anything to us while we were in our rigs.
Yeah.
They could have reached up and mangled Carlos's tent. They could have rocked my Jeep, which I've had happen before.
Yeah.
They could have done so much, and they didn't. They just walked around and rattled some of the things that we had, like our chairs and stuff that we had out. They walked around and talked back and forth.
Hmm.
Um, but like Carlos said, he was in a tent, so he could hear it better than I could. I was in the Jeep with the windows up, and so I didn't hear as much as what he did. I could hear
Yeah.
talking, but I thought it was him. But
Wow.
so yeah, so this journey that I've been on for the past 24 years has been um one I never expected to be on. I never thought I would ever even believe in these beings the whole time I was growing up.
Wow.
Now I not only believe in them, I try to help people who are having bad encounters change them to be good encounters,
Yeah.
because they are people and they deserve respect. And if you don't respect them, you're never, ever going to see them, or what you are going to have happen to you is going to be something that's going to be a bad encounter.
Right.
And, they can be absolutely terrifying, but they
Hmm.
can be equally as sweet too. So,
Yeah.
be respectful. And your intercultural communication class that you took in college, use it. That's what, use it, because I've found that when your intent has to be pure and it has to be honest. Because if you're dishonest in any way, they see right through it. So be honest if you want to see one. Carlos did. Hey, I want to see you. I want to see you. And so if you really honestly want to see them, they might just say, "Hey, you want to see us? Come on out."
Come to where we are.
You
Yeah.
got the if you got the grit,
Yeah.
but whatever you do, don't do it with a weapon. Don't do it with any intent to harm one of them.
Hmm.
You're looking at moms and dads and grandfathers and grandmothers and children and their families, just like we do. We
Hmm.
just like
Hmm.
what we have. You know,
Yeah.
I've literally seen their children and the mothers with their children, and there is no difference other than they're just a people that chooses to remain they remain segregated from us, and probably for good
Good
reasons. I don't
reason.
think we're yeah, I don't
Yeah.
think we're good. And you know, so if you be honest and honest to the point where if you tell them that you're going to be back, you better be back. If you tell them that you're leaving and you're not going to come back, don't ever go back again. Keep your word.
Yes.
So,
I think what you said about intention is so incredibly important.
yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because you can't, you cannot trick these people. You cannot, they always seem to understand. It's almost like they know us better than we know ourselves as human beings, and they read us so clearly. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think their intuition is 100% more than ours could ever
Yeah.
be. You have to even look at it like animals. Even if your dog, if you, for those of you that have had a dog that loves everybody, but there's one person that dog doesn't like, pay attention to that dog. It knows something that you don't. That dog is still connected to I its intuition hasn't been destroyed by
Yeah.
creature
Yeah.
comforts.
Yeah.
We have destroyed our intuition throughout history by all of these things that we do to make our lives easier has removed that intuition. We don't need it anymore for survival.
Yeah.
Back in the day, we
Oh, yeah.
did. We needed it for survival.
I think the time is coming where we are going to need our intuition more than ever.
Yes.
I
Yes.
think, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I remember reading, I don't, I, it's been, I've read so many Sasquatch related books. I don't remember who said this, but it was like a Sasquatch communicated this to a person and said, one of the reasons that you as humans don't see us more often is because of your fear. Like they can smell our fear. They know our fear, and so they're not going to show you. Like if you come into the forest and you're incredibly fearful, the last thing they're going to do is show you themselves. I mean, and literally
Yeah.
this Sasquatch said it's your level of fear that will keep us invisible. Like we're not going to approach you if you're already terrified, you know?
Yep. Yep. That's one thing that I've discovered too. There's I call her grandmother. She's a woman, one of the forest people.
Mm-hmm.
She will not let you look at her face. You can see her body, but she'll put her fists and she'll hide her face. She does not want you to look at her face. And there's been a couple of times that she's reached out and touched me, and I've gone to look at her and she'll cover her face. You can't see her face. Um, and you have to go off of what your gut tells you with them. You have to almost, that's the communication that you have is your gut. You
Mm-hmm.
have to communicate through your gut feelings. um, because they don't talk. Uh, they don't talk in, I guess, the way that we do. They will only speak if they have to. And the rest of the time, they project kind of the feelings that they want you to have, and they want you to project that back. It's it, I guess intuition is the best way to describe it. It's some people call it mind speak. And I think it's becoming, you have to be really careful because now in a lot of different circles, that's a joke. People are like,
Mm-hmm.
oh boy, are you schizophrenic, or what did you smoke for breakfast? But it's really what it is just being in tune with what your gut is telling you. And if your gut is telling you that you're safe, then you can sit down, rest, and just put into your kind of your thoughts
Mm-hmm.
something peaceful and kind and nice. If you tense up and you're like, okay, I'm freaked out, like Carlos and I, oh, time to go. The hair on our arms stood straight up. We're like, time to go. Our gut said we were in the wrong place.
Right.
We could have sat there and said, okay, we invited you to our camp, come sit down with us. But we were like, nope,
Yeah.
nope, because what it did was it let us know aggressively through its stomping. That's how it communicated. You're in the wrong place.
Right.
You get back up there on that road where you belong, because this is where we belong.
Yeah.
And so it was like, yep, yep, we're doing what we're told.
Yeah. No, that's the right thing to do. I mean, I think it's always the right thing to do. If they're asking you to leave by throwing sticks or throwing rocks or screaming at you, then you need to respectfully just get the hell out of there. I mean, you need to
Absolutely.
respect them. It's their home
Yep.
that you're in. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
If you're in the wrong place, you respect it. You don't know what's there. There could have been a child, there could have
Hmm.
been an elder, that they're trying to protect. There could be a million and one things that they will do to say, okay, you stay. One of the things that we have learned is that um they'll clank rocks together when they're trying to tell you stop, don't go any further, stop, stop, stop. you know um what happened with one of the other girls that are on our team, she and I were hiking and I got a rock clank, and so we stopped and we waited, and it was like an hour later we started walking again and the rock clank stopped. So we're like, okay, we're good to go. We kept on hiking, and as we were hiking, in the trail ahead of us was a deer that they had killed. And it was so fresh that she was still body temperature.
Wow.
And there was nothing wrong with her except her neck had been broken. Her neck had been snapped.
Yeah.
And we were like, I'm so sorry. We were interrupting their hunt. And
Yeah.
so we just turned around and left. We were like, sorry, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
Wow.
Whoops.
Yeah. But
But yeah, so if you, yeah,
that's such an important thing that you shared though for people. Yeah.
yeah.
Any tips that you have? I love what you're doing. I love the fact that you've been invited, to educate people and your people and, the audience as well. That's, anything that you want to share with us that helps to educate the rest of us. I deeply appreciate that. And I know everyone else will too.
Well, I hope that it will, I'm not going to say save somebody, because that's not the word that I want to use, but I hope that what it will do will establish positive interactions, because this is a coexistence that we need to have. There is a growing population. They have children. Those children are going to have children. We have children. We're going to have children, and our communities are eventually going to collide. And the way to be able to get them so that we can uh, interact peacefully
Sure.
is respect, mutual respect. And I know that I step on a lot of toes. I've been to symposiums where I've spoken and people have gotten up and walked out because they were so angry at me. But, you know, I'm not going to push ever harming one or trying to capture one for science. I'm sorry, we have enough science that has already proven their existence. We don't need to prove their existence anymore. What we need to do is learn how to communicate back and forth so that we don't collide. I
Mhm.
it would be better to have it like this rather than collide.
Exactly.
And right now in some instances it's colliding, and that's places like, where Fred Roll is at over in Alaska.
Mhm.
I love his show and I subscribe to it. So, I mean, it's a great show, but there's a different tribe up there than there
Yes.
is down here. And I try to tell people, think interculturally. They're not going to all be friendly, nice. There's some that are going to be downright deadly. You have got to learn how to be respectful while you're trying to figure it out and
Sure.
go with your intuition.
Yeah, learn everything you can. If you're going to a particular region, read and learn and watch channels that are focused in that area to learn, how they're approaching them peacefully. And I
Yes.
totally agree with you in regards to Fred. I mean that uh they're just a different there's a different it's a different area up there. I was just up there at the end of June. I visited with Fred. I was on a camping,
Yeah.
yeah, camping thing, and but that's such great advice. If you're going to go to France, you learn about you learn about the culture. You even maybe learn the language or whatever. I mean, because people have different customs over there. So why don't, it would be so awesome. Like if you could be someone who could teach other people how to respect the ones in your area that you deal with, that you
Yeah.
understand and that they've taught you, okay, this is how to be with us in a way that's respectful. And if there were, other people in other regions who could do the same thing, I would love to be a part of any of that, of
Oh,
helping,
absolutely.
yeah, helping to
If
bring
you're
understanding.
if you're ever in the areas where we frequent, I could definitely help you with being able to have like a positive experience.
Yeah,
One of the fun things, I guess, about having the positive experiences is that it shows you the humanness of who they are, to the point where my son, he's got, like I said, this gifting station where they gift him different trinkets and stuff. And it's so fun for him. Like he said, it's almost like dealing with children. And
hmm
what he's got going on with him is a group of juveniles that have just gathered around his property that are coming and just enjoying the energy and the playfulness. And so it's things like he had all these birdhouses in the garden that they had hanging in their garden, like just how you have them hanging on those shepherd's hooks and stuff. These birdhouses, well, they got up one morning and the birdhouses were all hanging in a tree. They put the birdhouses where the birds go, up in the tree.
that's awesome.
So he started putting like Christmas ornaments down and putting they started anything that hangs, they put it in the trees. And so, and up way higher than he could ever reach, and just went, Mom, there was a cool, like a sundial kind of thing that had a loop at the end where you could hang it from your kind of your window kind of thing.
Mhm.
They picked that up and hung that from the tree. And so it was just,
That's so awesome.
yeah.
Do
And
you?
so he said that it's been a lot of fun for him to be able to, each day he'll call me and he'll be like, well, guess what happened, and it was really touching for me because, I moved down here to Oregon a few months ago for a job. And so I'm down here now and I didn't want to leave. It was like, oh, I don't want to leave. I don't want to leave my home, but I have to. And I had to go back a few months ago to speak at a symposium in Medellin Falls, and which was nearby where I had that encounter. And so I here he had this gifting station going on, and the gifts were already starting to come in, and they were frequenting his property. And I said, I want to leave a gift. I want to leave a gift. And so he's got this big abalone shell that he was using for smudging, and instead he put it out in the yard where they were coming right up to the house, and he was putting trinkets in the abalone shell. Well, that went on for just a few times until they brought their own abalone shell, and he goes, I don't even know where they got it, but there was a smaller one that they put their trinkets in to gift to him. And so I told him, I want to leave something. So I put like a heart with some dried wildflowers. It was a resin heart with some dried wildflowers in it, and I set it in there. And then I left. And then when I got back, nothing had changed, because sometimes they're there, sometimes they
Mm-hmm.
don't. They come back, sometimes they're gone for a few days, and then they'll
Yeah.
come back and they'll pick up where they left off. Well, they hadn't come back by the time I had to leave and head back down to Oregon. I got down here and he called me and he's like, Mom, you're never gonna guess what they left you. And I'm like, what? They left, and this was something that started clear back in the very beginning. I don't know if you're familiar with Tom Cantrell.
Mhm.
Tom Cantrell, great author and a dear friend of mine. In the very beginning, I'd asked him, about glyphs and how to speak to the people. And he said, well, get a bunch of sticks and do a design. And when you want to introduce yourself, do that design and tell them that that's you. And so I couldn't think of anything. So I put an A in sticks. I put an A in sticks on the ground, and I pointed to it. And I knew that they were there because I could hear them moving around and whistling and stuff and doing a few hoots and stuff.
Mhm.
So I put my A down on the ground and I pointed to it, and then I pointed to myself. And then I pointed to the A and I pointed to myself. And then I got a group of sticks and I put them next to it. And then I pointed to them and pointed to that group of sticks and waited for them to, which they built this elaborate glyph that there's no way I could copy it if I sat for hours and tried to
Wow.
figure it out. They built this elaborate glyph. Um, but when I got the gift back in the abalone shell, they had found some little trinkets. One of it was a little aluminum, and I don't know where they got this, but it was an aluminum, like a lizard that you people wear on their necklaces, like
Hmm.
the little curled up, almost a Aztec sort of design.
Yes.
And then a little bell, a little bell, like a Christmas bell, and they put it next to an A. And I went, oh,
Wow.
that was your present to me. They put my name. So
Wow. That's
when
amazing.
you when you see this stuff, um, more and more, you see the humanness, and it makes you tend to kind of clash with people that go, oh, they're just an animal, or they're just a, you know, it's you're just full of it, you just want it to be human, that kind of stuff. And you're
Yeah.
like,
No.
no.
Yeah. No. Yeah. No. Do you have a website that people can go to, or do you have a social media where you share
um
your stuff?
what we have is Legacy Discoveries. We have a YouTube channel,
Oh,
and
good.
if you look up Legacy Discoveries site hotel, you will see the day-to-day interactions that my son has. I don't do the YouTube myself because I'm not around internet. I had to come to the side of the road to do internet for today. So I don't contribute to the internet YouTube, but we do have a Facebook Legacy Discoveries, and I do contribute to that. So
Okay.
if you see the logo of a forest being with LD, that's Legacy Discoveries, and it should have underneath it In Search of the Truth. So if you
Okay.
look up Legacy Discoveries In Search of the Truth, that's my son and I's Facebook, and then he's got the Legacy Discoveries YouTube, which is literally day to day showing the gifts that's going on and on, off and on. So for any of you who might have gifting station, there's some stuff in there that you might find useful. So, and
Absolutely.
they've been able to even leave us castings. So we've been able to get castings of handprints and footprints and stuff that they've done for us. My son asked permission and they gave it to him. He asked for them to leave footprints, and so he got a big Walmart tub and he filled it full of flour and put a lid on it. And periodically they take the lid off and stamp a footprint or a handprint, put the lid back on. And sometimes um, his little niece, who's 4 years old, she can't pronounce Sasquatch. I think she calls him uh, sassy, sassy, sassy swatches or something. She can't pronounce it, but she's obsessed with them. And she wanted to put her little footprint in the flower and see if they would put their footprint next to hers. And what they did was she stamped her little footprint in the flower. They put the lid on it and came back the next day, and they had taken a little dandelion poof ball and then put it right in the middle of her footprint and then put the lid back on.
Wow.
So they do some really sweet things. So um they if you tune in to that YouTube channel, and I invite you to, if you have any suggestions. We're using also a chalkboard, and we'll draw out intentions and words on the chalkboard with pictures, and sometimes they draw things back, sometimes they don't, but um it's a useful tool and it seems to be working. So
Oh, that's
yeah,
so awesome. That's so awesome. Well, I hope that some point you'll come back on the channel and share some more stuff with us. You know,
I'd love to.
yeah, some more of like I would really love to hear more about the elder that you've seen and the mom and the babies that you've seen. And I'd love to do witness sketches too of, you
Oh,
know, of
absolutely.
any other Sasquatches that you've seen.
I would love for you to be able to. You did such a fantastic job with
Thank you.
the one male that I saw, that I would love to have you work on the others as well, because you were the only one that I've been able to get as close to what I actually saw. Now, I'm not, please don't think that I'm dissing on the other people, because I have several friends who do who do these Sasquatch sketches. One of them in particular uses AI, and she does a fantastic job, but she admitted, she goes, I can't make one that doesn't look like a gorilla, because AI makes Sasquatch look like a gorilla. And she said the majority of people have the faces that look human. And so
Right.
it's really, really difficult. She was unable to, and she kind of went, I can't do it.
Yeah.
And I went, okay, well, I'll just keep looking. Then dear friend Dan Nedrolo told
Oh,
me
yes.
about
Yeah,
you. And
Dan.
I was like, yes, thank you, Dan.
Oh, thank you, Dan, for doing that. It seems like more and more Angelique people are the witnesses I'm working with recently, like in the last 2 years, their Sasquatches are very, very human-like. I think, I
Yes.
mean, that's a trend I'm seeing more and more. And I'm not sure if it's um, maybe people that saw more human-like ones were just kind of afraid to come forward and talk about it because they didn't think they were going to be believed.
Yeah.
But that seems to be a trend I'm seeing more and more.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And that's happened to me where people have said, "Oh yeah, whatever." If I had have told them it looked like a monster and was coming at me, ripping up the ground and, dragging knuckles and stuff, I think they would have believed me more. But the fact that I told them that he was absolutely gorgeous, they were like, I had one person actually tell me that what I saw was my brain, like I was so desperate for a husband at the time that you must have just projected what you were looking for onto it. And I'm like, no,
What in the hell? What the?
I'm fine being single. I know I'm okay. I don't need to project anything, but I do recognize beauty when I see it. And he was absolutely the most beautiful man I think I've ever seen. And when I say beautiful, I don't mean he wasn't handsome. He was hyper handsome.
Wow. That's just
But
amazing. Well, I just appreciate you. Thank you so much for working with me, and thank you so much for giving me your time today. And I really, really want to hear more about the experiences that you've had, and I want to draw some more of the Sasquatch that you've seen.
I would love to, and I could probably talk your ear off for a whole day. I probably could.
I would love that. I would love to sit next to a campfire and share our stories. That would just be awesome. Maybe someday we can do that.
Sure, that'd be great.
Well,
Thank you
thank you.
so much.
Thank you so much.
Have a great day.
You have a great day too.
You too. Bye bye.
Bye bye.